All right, so it's 6:03, and I officially want to call the regular meeting of April of the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force, the regular meeting of April 6th to order. And absent today from the committee, from the task force, are Sandra and Gina. And welcome everyone. And just for those of you joining us for the first time, if we don't have any real voting items today, but when there is something to vote on, like for instance, when I make a motion to add an item to the agenda, which is to do a deep dive of the rally, the Stop Asian Hate rally, we won't ask you non-official task force members to vote. That is only for the official members. So that's just the one item of business. So with that, we're called to order at 6:03. The first item is to approve the minutes of March 30th. Do I have a motion to approve? Any makes the motion? Is there a second?
Second it.
Okay, Doug, any comments, questions, changes to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions or noes?
I have to abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay, so an abstention from Karen. Thank you.
Yep.
I am going to make a motion that we add an item to the agenda, which is a deep dive and a debriefing of the, or however deep we go. But the motion is to have a debrief of the Stop Asian Hate rally, and to hear from two members of the community. So my official motion is to add the item of the Stop Asian Hate rally debrief. Is there a second to that motion?
I will second it happily. Karen.
Karen, all in favor? I'm sorry, is there any discussion on this? All in favor? Any discussion from the community? Sorry, I just want to be formal about this. So, okay, so all in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Any noes? Great. So it's added. And with that, Amy, why don't I turn this over to you and you can introduce yourself and Rosalie and take it away.
All right, great. Thanks for this opportunity to meet with you all and to let you know about this amazing event that we held on the Fairfield Town Hall Green this past Saturday morning at 10 during the end of a Holy Week. And it was an event that was put together literally in 2.5 days. So it was a monumental task that I was able to take on with a collective leadership of Fairfield Standing United. I turned to my friends and said that I am really angry and I'm in pain about what is happening. And so folks acted, and we had so much positive responses from all the people that we reached out to. It was from like cross-racial solidarity to reaching out to high school teachers. And, given that it was the Wednesday before Good Friday, we had to move very quickly. So, thankfully I was in touch with Rose Healy, who teaches Mandarin Chinese at Ward, and got in touch with Rosalie. And I want to respect Rosalie's time as a senior in high school. So I kind of want to just make sure, Rosalie, how is your time? I want to give it over to you if you have work to do. What's your time like before I keep going?
I'm pretty open. I mean, I'm gonna have dinner at like 6:45, but other than that.
Okay. So I just want to kind of give the task force just an overview about the event, and how what I learned is that we have work to do, and that I formed an email for the event, but have gotten, and through that have gotten lots of different emails from community members who saw our posting about the event through various social media. And there are a lot of people who are interested in talking and sharing their experiences. And so I look forward to more community conversations and greater outreach to the Asian Pacific American community in Fairfield, because there is one. We just haven't had a forum to, or we really haven't had the opportunity or taken the opportunity, quite frankly, to come together. It's awful that it has taken a tragedy, a nationwide tragedy, and an absolute spike in violence against our communities to spark this, but it's time. So so in all, it was a great event that whose origins were from pain and transformed into a positive experience on Saturday, where we had Attorney General William Tong kick it off. And I had seen him speak at the Westport event. And we had Tony Huang and different coalition connections as well. I thought that was really important to convey that we have people standing alongside of us. The most important part of the event was our youth, and to hear what they are currently experiencing in our public schools in Fairfield. That most heartbreaking is that I had to hear stories that from high schoolers and college students who went through the Fairfield Public Schools that were similar to mine, okay, over 30 years ago. This should not happen. So I'm very energized and fired up to make transformative change. And in terms of the event, only positive feedback I'm getting, and it's just amazing and energizing. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'll turn it over to you, Rosalie, because I have a few things that I wanted to add in the context of our task force. But Rosalie, I'd love to, anyone have immediate questions for Amy? Because if not, I'll turn to Rosalie and then we can open this up wider. So Rosalie, can I turn it to you for some of your thoughts and feedback?
Yeah, so I'm Rosalie. I'm the lead of the Pan Asian Association over at Ward. I created that club before the event in Atlanta. It just happened to be sort of like timing wise, sort of, I guess, convenient, probably the wrong word, but that's how it worked out. The club is not necessarily an activism club, but the idea is that Pan Asian people are going to be able to come together and have a community space where we can talk. I spoke at the rally, and I'm organizing my own rally on April 24th at 5:30 p.m. And I feel comfortable speaking out about my feelings, but I know a lot of people my age, especially Asian students, being minorities in the school systems, feel very uncomfortable speaking out. But through the Pan Asian Association, we've been able to have these student-to-student discussions about these things, and people have been able to come out with their own opinions. And people who are in the Pan Asian Association who went to the rally on Saturday all agree that the student speaking part of it was the most interesting, for lack of a better word. But I thought that it was really nice to be able to hear everyone's stories, and I'm hoping that the rally that I'm going to be planning will focus more on that.
Thank you so much. And having heard, I don't know if anyone else had a chance to hear Rosalie at the rally the other day. What was so, and again, compelling is not the right word, but what was so important was hearing your direct experiences, because I think no amount of I think that there's a lot of, data that we can do, and we talk about needing metrics so that we can talk about how we look at these issues. To me, nothing is more moving and compelling than hearing directly from you and your lived experience as real tangible proof of why it is so important that we're doing this work. And one of the challenges that we've been faced with as a task force in a community that is 90% white is that not everybody, because it's not their lived experience or their own personal story, can appreciate that the pain and some of the experiences that you talked about and the other students talked about, that exists, because they don't see it, so they don't know that it's here. And I think the more that we can help as an ally, as a group of allies, amplify and share your stories, the more people will open their windows a little bit more to understanding, and we can find that shared humanity. And one of the concerns as the task force has been that we've always talked about that people have either made the assumption, or we've talked about this work in terms of Black and Brown and Indigenous people of color and biracial people of color, and that there has been not enough attention paid to the Asian American community and the Pacific Islander community. And I think as a group, we really have talked about this work in terms of the 10% not white community here. So for me personally, and I'm not speaking collectively, I'm so glad to be able to amplify again your stories and this work. And as we are preparing our blueprint, which is speaking broadly in terms of equity and inclusion, I think it will be important to be able to point to specific stories and specific experiences. So I just wanted to share that, and congratulations on chipping away. I know it's really hard, but I hope that you feel somewhat gratified and find solace in the fact that so many people did come out for us, for a Saturday. And having been on the organizing end, sometimes when you have 7 people show up for something, you're like home run, but this was, hundreds. So really well done. I want to open this up to the task force. Any questions, any comments? And to any?
Rosaline, thank you for sharing what you shared. And then Nancy, you talk about the lived experience, and Kathy and I have talked about it. So when your child refuses to get the yearbook and wants to graduate early, that tells you a lot. You don't need someone to tell you that. That what happens in the high schools in Fairfield. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened to my daughter. And she has never come back. Has not kept in touch with anyone in school. And that's part of her life that she would like to erase, because it was that painful. She graduated at 17, took early, and refused her. It's when she refused to get her yearbook that I realized how deep the pain was. So it's very real. It's very real for people who, who've gone through it and choose not to talk about it, or know that there is no place to share. So thank you for sharing. It's very much there, very much there.
Yes, it is.
And let's not make a bone about it that Fairfield does not have this problem. It's just that we have chosen not to say anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did the teachers know? Yes. Did the principal know? Yes. Was anything done? No. So I want to be categorically say that right now, because it's been time to say that. Yeah.
You're reminding me of something, Innie, and thank you for sharing that. And I'm really sorry that was your daughter's experience. One of our former task force members had said something that really still shakes me to my core, because we've had a lot of discussions with this group about people in town not really being open to seeing that there is a race, an issue with racism in the town. And she made the statement to this group that her humanity has to be enough. And I hope that as a grown-up, as you know, listening to you and your fellow students, that we can instill in you and understand, or that we help frame in some small way that this work is a reminder that, you know, your humanity is enough, that these stories mean something, and that we hear them, and that, you know, at least there is a larger group who may not be vocal because they haven't had the opportunity yet, a forum, as you said, Amy, for fighting against that. So
Yes.
yeah.
Can I say, Nancy, it just, it breaks my heart to hear about your daughter's experience, but I have to say, it doesn't surprise me, and that's sad to say. You know, I hope that going forward, we can make change, and transformative change. It has to happen. And that one point that resonated with me with a speech that William Tong gave, and I don't think he said it here in Fairfield, but he did say it 2 Saturdays ago in Westport, when after the killing of George Floyd happened, and the rallies and the marches happened, he shared that he had paused to wonder whether or not his colleagues thought of him as a person of color. And I share this with you because the Asian Pacific American community is wide. We are not monolithic. And you need to know that there are some of us who have want a closer proximity to whiteness. So that is out there, but that is not, that's not prevalent in my mind, but I do want to mention that. But for a majority of us, and myself and the youth speakers, what I heard was the problem of the Asian Pacific American community is that we are still perceived as foreigners, and in Rosalie's words, perpetual foreigners. I said forever foreigners, and that has got to change. And that our charge, I believe, is to change that, is to push for the inclusion of history of Asians in America. Many of us have been, our families have been here for generations, but we don't hear enough of that. Another point is that we also don't get the history of how there has been multiple events and experiences that show cross-racial solidarity between and among different Asian groups, different points of history. So this Black on Asian conversation it hurts all of us, and it's out of context, and it's not helpful. And in my view, it is what is the word words I'm looking for? It's losing my vocabulary. It's deliberate. It's not an accident that we don't know this history. By design, that's what the words I'm looking for, by design.
So I agree with what you say, 100%. It is when we look at the other person as the other, that's where the problem lies. It's not the color, it's not the Asian or the Pan-Asian or the Latino, it's not that. It's when we perceive that anyone else other than white is not acceptable. That's the problem. And when we bunch it into, it's actually a classic case of colonialism, divide and rule. It's a classic case So we are still in that scenario. If you divide them up, they will not have enough power to challenge you.
Yes, yes, I have to say one other thing. I so agree with that, and I was so proud of my daughter. My daughter was the final speaker on Saturday, and I yeah, had nothing to do with her words, and she hit a home run at the end when she said that what we're experiencing today has its roots in U.S. intervention, in colonization, and in imperialism. And so there's a more history that puts this all into context.
I have a comment about that. I think that an important thing fundamentally about the Asian experience historically is that, like, we are, I think, certain Asian groups have been considered like having a proximity to whiteness, but that proximity has always been conditional. And the condition has always been when it's been helpful for white people to oppress other groups, or when we're meek and not speaking out. I think that a lot of current Asian students feel that it's in their benefit to not rock the boat, so to speak. I know that's like a stereotype, but that's how a lot of people actually feel, because then maybe they'll be able to fit in. But I think it's important to note that we've never really been considered white. That's never been the case, even if that's been like the way that it's been treated. We are people of color and we have these experiences. And I think part of the problem is that a lot of people, even Asian people, feed into that model minority myth. And it's that, I think that's why it's harder to speak out about our issues, because people are like, oh, well, you know, it's just a joke, or it's not all that serious, etc. I don't know if that's the tone of where the meeting is going. It's just something I was thinking about.
Well, no,
No,
and
agreed.
it is. I mean, I think that, this is a space where we can have these conversations and that insight. For me, I've learned so much, and I guess the word is guilty. I was guilty of that as well. I mean, because I know that when I was asked to help shape this committee, I've had to reframe my thinking in terms of what it is, what non-white means, and not because I appreciate everything you've said, but it's been an education in terms of where the discrimination has been and what people feel. And again, it's just not having been open to these different lived experiences. And I think we have a real responsibility to make sure exactly what you're talking about, and what, Amy, you said in your comments before, that the way we create a blueprint moving forward helps educate people who don't understand this and what you're saying exactly, and helping kind of steer the conversation in this direction. Because I think people, well-intentioned and who want to understand and who want to be an ally don't have the information. And
Right.
And again, fully embracing what it means to be an anti-racist is coming to terms with some of this. And again, my own ignorance, which I've had to face. And that's really hard. There's can be a lot of, as we all know, a lot of shame associated with that, and guilt about how we've perpetuated something. So I think we have an opportunity here to help to have these conversations, so that there is a space, Rosalie, where you can come and say exactly what you just said. So of course, this is where the conversation needs to go. And thank you for that.
And our job, Rosalie and Amy in particular, who are joining us today, our job is going to be making sure that our blueprint does more than just say, yes, we want you to have a forum to share your stories and experiences. Because, people could say, oh, wow, I'm so sorry that happened to you, or I have so much empathy for what you're going through. But if we don't get people to change things so that those experiences stop, so that not another daughter doesn't have to go through what Annie's daughter went through, what my daughter has been through, what Amy's children are going through, what Rosalie, you have gone through. You know, we need to make a blueprint that is very action focused so that things change, because it's not enough to just share the stories, which is a great start, but it has to result in change or none of us will be satisfied.
I also think just, you know, we've struggled to find our focus with this, because I think what we thought we were doing ended up not really being what we're supposed to be doing, or we were told that. And we have this opportunity to speak right to the top of the pyramid on this, in terms of, you know, the town officials and town leaders. And whereas I think initially we thought part of what we were going to do is really build healing conversations and groups and really work to provide avenues and mechanisms for these sorts of stories to get out to the town of Fairfield, to actually start to change hearts and minds. I think we've sort of resolved that actually we have not been charged with that. And our job is to tell the town leaders what we think needs to happen. And in my mind, the number one thing that needs to happen is the town leaders need to get out in front of this and put a stake in the ground, say this is an issue, this needs to be addressed. And that doesn't mean that the community conversations don't go on. We need to find a mechanism to channel that and collaborate and organize that. It feels to me our first goal is to get the leaders to stop equivocating. We need a statement. We need proclamations. We need, you know, accurate information on the websites. You know, it's that sort of stuff. And it's not a question of whether this is an issue or not. It is an issue, period. And let's get on.
And Kathy, I'll turn to you. I just want to add to what you're saying, Doug, because I had made the statement as a select woman that this task was, I said the words, this task force was formed as an acknowledgement of systemic racism in the town of Fairfield. And I was at it, it actually didn't go over well. I got pushback on that. And then that's where we were told we needed metrics. And while it may be true, that, and which led our, you know, our former task force member to talk about her humanity, and that wasn't enough. And so it was in that context. And when Gina and I were first meeting with the potential candidates, we said, you know, our feeling was that there were not two sides to this issue. And that actually quickly, we got pushback on that it was arguable to say, we first had to almost prove it, which is, you know, Karen, to your point, like the stories, when you say, Doug, we have to get out in front of it, it's like part of it for me is everybody in town needs to hear these stories and to have this understanding, because so again, if we can help amplify in any way some of this lived, it's not just that, of course, but anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that, but I just thought it was important to kind of say, to counter that, Doug, because I had said that and yet we got pushback on that.
That actually is my point, is that was not an acceptable statement by, you know, by the full leadership of the town.
Right.
We got sort of pushed back on that. And I think in our blueprint, as we get into that, we need to really wrestle, are we going to commit to that as a recommendation, that we sort of make a statement and not a
First and foremost, it is an acknowledgement of, period. Otherwise, there's like no basis for the discussion. Kathy,
Right.
sorry, go ahead.
So I have a question for Amy and for Rosalie, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so maybe you think about this and then give us feedback later. But Amy and I have talked about the idea of storytelling, and both of you have talked about the fact that that was the most powerful part of your rally, was the storytelling. I'm sorry I missed it, I wasn't here, but I wonder if you can think about ways for us to collect those stories from the people who feel they can tell the story. I mean, I know many people, it's painful to tell the story, but I think that one of the things that we keep hearing, which is what we're talking about, what Doug and Nancy are both referring to, is this idea that we somehow have to prove it. And we're not out to prove it, because we don't believe, well, most of us, I think on the board, on the task force, don't believe we have to prove it. But every time we hear that metrics and those numbers and those things, they're looking for proof. So rather than even going down that road, if we could somehow figure out ways to collect these stories and have them available, so that when someone says, well, I don't think that really happened, we can just say, well, you can go listen to these stories. or you can go read
Yeah.
these stories, because those people are not at the rally. They're not there.
Right.
The people who want the
Yes.
proof are not
Yeah.
hearing it in those. So if you could just think about that question and help us, give us
It's
some
like-
feedback.
It's like our own,
I mean,
own
as you
version
were
of
speaking,
StoryCorps.
I
Yeah,
was just going to say
Yeah,
that. Exactly. Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
listening to the StoryCorps
I think we need that.
stories, yeah, those testimonials, they're very moving.
Yeah.
So
Rose,
And a
Rosalie-
record kept somewhere, an archive in the town.
Rosalie, do you ever work with the Fairfield Equity Coalition? Have you ever met with those students?
I'm working with them right now on the rally that we're working on.
Because there may be, if that's something that remotely resonates, I imagine with smarter, more techie minds, if that's something that is interesting to you, just to put it, and I'm a storyteller in my professional day life, production person, that might be an interesting collaboration between your groups that the students take on. You know, you build a website with video capability and
Interview each other.
interview each other, and so
That shared humanity comes out in those interviews. It's as
Okay.
much the questioner as it is the responder when you listen to those.
So wearing my
Yeah.
producer hat, if
Yeah.
that's something you would want to speak about offline, if that like tickles your interest at all, you can.
It definitely does. It's just, I think that the difference is that if it's at a rally, it's sort of like just in front of a group of allies. I think people will actually be less willing to speak if they think it's going to be scrutinized by people who like don't believe them and want to pick apart their stories.
But there's no opportunity for them to comment. It's not something that's on social media with comments. It's
Mhm.
just a story.
Yeah, so
hear what you're saying,
definitely,
yeah.
I definitely like that idea. I'm just, as I've been putting together the rally and trying to get people who are willing to speak, that has been the biggest
Of
issue.
course.
yes,
But yes, I am interested in that.
It's incredible to me to listen to all of you, to all of the students who spoke, and Rosalie, you were incredible. And again, your personality is so infectious. And Amy, you must have been super proud of your kids and your daughter. It's such a vulnerable thing. So I appreciate what you're saying, Rosalie. You're so exposed. And, you know, I kept hearing words like brave and courageous. And while you may not have felt those things, it certainly, as a grown-up and as a mom, I was watching thinking, wow, that's really like, not everybody would have had that fortitude and strength and courage to be able to address a crowd. So I understand why it's an issue, and especially social media and the way people can be so nasty, but maybe there's a way with a closed group or something.
I think so. I mean, I have to tell you that my son has friends at Ludlow High School who have stories. And it was, and they're too shy. They're too shy. They're to get out there, introverted, to be in a vulnerable place. And I think that says something for the fact that we weren't able to have any male high school students come forward and feel brave to do so. I think that is a huge statement right there. Yeah. So I would love to think more on this and speak to teachers at both high schools. I know that there is interest at both high schools to make connections with students and their stories. So I love that idea of somehow doing a StoryCorps, because I know both high schools have the capability. They both have recording studios, right, for broadcasting studios for their news broadcasts at each school. The other thing, I had someone in the crowd want to connect the Staples High School students with Fairfield students. So maybe there will be like a wider Fairfield County
Discussion.
something together, discussion or connection, or movement forward.
Maybe it's voice
towards
recording.
this end.
Maybe it's voice only.
I have a sort of solution I was thinking about. We could just do like an anonymous form type thing, and then the actual website could just be, lists of stories, and then the cover could just be those people who are willing to tell their own stories or other people's stories. And that might sort of try and
Yeah, I
fix
wonder
that.
if you could ask people to anonymously upload an audio file.
I think that might be a little bit much if it were going for the anonymous route. Because I mean, I will definitely try and like talk about that with the Fairfield Equity Coalition. But if the idea is that you're so uncomfortable speaking out that you can't even like put your name to something, I think the off chance that someone could like hear your voice and recognize you might
Very fair. That's
be
fair.
off-putting.
Very
Yeah.
fair.
That's,
Well, I think I will speak. First of all, this is an open group. The Racial Equity and Justice Task Force, we're working towards, as I think you've heard at this point, a blueprint to present to the town to make permanent recommendations. Among them, I think first and foremost is an acknowledgement that systemic racism exists, that these microaggressions are not, it exists as a real, it's a funny term. I think, Amy, did you address this? That these are the
I
things
did.
that, yeah. Do you want to talk about that? Because I thought that was so compelling, important for people to realize.
Yes, I was invited to be part of a Facebook group, Inclusive Parents of Fairfield, and one of the moderators asked a question about microaggressions. What is your definition? What are some examples? And my first reaction to that was, make no mistake, microaggressions are aggressions, and that they're more in a lot of ways more insidious. They get into your psyche, and have lifelong damage. They can, potential as physical damage. So that was my point. I don't love the term, but they are aggressions, microaggressions.
Yeah, so I think it's an acknowledgement of these daily indignities. It's the acknowledgement that there's deep systems. I think it's acknowledgement of history. It's an acknowledgement that we need to do more to teach culture and language and history and share these experiences and share the stories. So, I hope you'll come back, because as we are working on this blueprint and making these permanent recommendations, we are agnostic from where the good ideas come, but certainly your input has already been so critical. Please come back and share the information about the rally so we can pass it on. And these meetings are open to the public. So if you find that you're compelled, and I know you have to go eat dinner, but if you're compelled to come back, it is a space where, we'll take this in many directions. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for coming today to talk about that rally and
Thank you for having
your
us.
experience. Anything else, Rosalie, that you want to leave us with for today, or no pressure?
No, I mean, I like that idea. So I'll be talking to Sarah Genovese, who she also spoke at the rally, and she is in the Fairfield Equity Coalition lead. So I'll be talking about that, and maybe I'll, depending on how that goes, I'll let you guys know what goes with that.
It's interesting, this is just like a random non sequitur thought, but I'm thinking about when we talk about our history and who we are as a community. The town website has like this much language based on our history of slavery here and the community that we were built on. We really don't have any area where we talk about who lives here. And one of the things I pointed out at the recent budget hearing was our first selectman was talking about who lived here. But we didn't have any robust discussion about what that really meant. That it's not just enough to say it's 90% white and it's 10% non-white. And I think we have an opportunity, and maybe this is something as a recommendation if the group decides, but we have an opportunity to really talk about who it is that is living here and what makes up this community, and take the website that is literally this much history and if it's not living on the website, just more resources, because it is one opportunity where we can educate the community.
Yes. That reminds me of how we had the Reverend Vanessa Rose from First Church Congregational at the rally, and she spoke about the history of that church and the history of erasure. I thought that was very powerful to bring forth, and so she seems like a good resource to talk about a part of history of Fairfield's history that the congregation knows about.
She was amazing, by the way.
She is.
I'm Jewish, but I will pray at her church because she was really right on.
Yes, for sure.
Anything else before Rosalie has to run to dinner? And don't let me push you off. I just was trying to be cognizant of the time for you. Nice shirt, Steve.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was gonna say that.
the rally was incredible. You guys were full of amazing amount of courage, and you were very inspiring to me. A lot of parallels, or some parallels, to what Black people go through, and my kids and the history books and the stuff that you discussed really struck a cold chord with me, and I appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for being there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna head out, but I'll keep you guys updated on what I do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rosalie.
Thank you. So unless there are
I know
other
you have to move on. I just
Yeah.
wanted to just connect with something before I go with what Steve just said. I had a longtime friend drive up from New York to come and show support for the rally on Saturday, and he's Black, and we went out to lunch afterwards. And so one of the stories, the first story that was shared, the anonymous student story, resonated with him because we have a friend, Ray, and my friend's Dre for short, and teachers always mix them up, and they look nothing alike. But it happened so many times that they thought to get t-shirts. I'm not Ray, I'm not Dre. But that's a problem. It happened so many times that they got t-shirts. And he also shared that getting followed in department stores, in any store, happened so many times that he developed 3 ways how to cope, depending on the day, depending on his mood. And the first way is to take these people on a tour. So they would go upstairs, downstairs, every which department. And to the third way, which is turning around and having a confrontation. So again, happened to him so many times, he had to develop 3 ways to cope. So I appreciate, Steve, that you shared that the stories resonated, because there are commonalities to be had, and I so appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, Amy,
And
that's,
again,
what you said sounds humorous, but it's not funny. There's nothing funny
No.
about it.
exactly. Yep. I mean, that, my friends, we try to, the coping mechanism was through humor, get these t-shirts.
Yeah.
But the underlying is about the lack of willingness for our white teachers to take time to see which is which student is which. It's just infuriating.
Yeah, and
So-
one of the things for me was, a big thing for me was, I tuned out of history, was not, I lost interest at a very early age because it didn't make any sense. There was none of us in there. And my kids graduated, we must be the same age as yours, Amy, because I've seen you around a lot. But I was anxious to get back to see what they're teaching in the history books to my kids. and
Mm.
they're using the same book, you know, from 40 years ago. So it's just baffling, you know, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, one bright spot though, as a new school media specialist, I pivoted in my career from being a classroom teacher on the elementary school, is that this is an exciting time for BIPOC creatives. There's more, this is a great time for publishing. More authors of color are publishing and creating books that show more representation. And I'm trying to remain hopeful that we will pivot in our teaching of history to include graphic novels and make it more interactive, you know, all different kinds of media, and make it more representative of our histories. So,
it's
thank you so much for this opportunity. I know you've got an agenda to get to, so
Well,
thank you, and I hope to continue the conversation, and I'll let you know, about how things evolve with other members of the community who have reached out to me and want to work together. So I'll keep in touch with you about how that goes, and maybe we'll, have another meeting where we'll have more of us to speak.
Yeah, please do. Please come back. This has been a really important conversation, and there are meetings where we have twice as many, and I just think I had hoped tonight could be one of those opportunities, but life being what it is, we go where we can, but look forward to being able to keep talking and with more ears and voices and minds involved. So thank you for coming tonight, and you're welcome to stay and listen. We're actually talking part of our blueprint. You've given us a lot to think about, and yeah, please feel free to weigh in. What I was going to do as we move on, and again, we can come back, Amy, you'll find we are very much with an agenda, but also free form. I wanted to turn to the checklist. What I've done is, and I'd like to share my screen. Thank you, Matt and Steve, for sharing some of your work to date. Can you see this? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So as we move on, basically I took the checklist and put things, and I don't think we have to go through. My hope is that we can answer questions today. If anyone has comments about the work they've done, this meeting came pretty quickly for all of us. If we could make sure we're all heading in the right direction and we feel good about the next steps. I got some language from Matt and Steve and separately from Sandra, who's still working. But what I've done is taken that checklist and basically put things in sentence form. And I can share this in a Google Doc, so you could either add it directly or where your area, your specific content area, you can, we can talk about the best way to edit this. But where things were a question, I turned them into sentences. And where, for instance, Steve and Matt had contributed, I took directly their piece and just plugged it in here. I don't know if this is the right way forward. I was just trying to keep us moving forward. So I thought, Matt and Steve, you did a really good job. I don't know if the two of you want to talk about it, and I can scroll through it. What's the best way here?
Nancy, could I just say too, Ryan and I worked on that first section, have a document we didn't share with anybody yet, but if we want to do that, I could share my screen and then send it over later. But it fleshes out what you've done here.
And can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I'm really excited since I was, getting my vaccine last week and missed our meeting. So I'm super excited that so much work got done. But I also would love to add what was just voiced in this meeting tonight, is the idea that our governance has to acknowledge the problem. So not only committing to addressing it, but acknowledging that we have it. You know what I mean? I don't know what the right language is for that, but I feel like that's the very first thing, admitting it, right?
We have some language for that, Nancy, if you want to let Doug pull up the document.
Great.
And you don't have to edit it right now. I just wanted to make a note or put a comment in, like, let's make sure that we start with the very, very, very basic first step of, you know,
Right.
we have.
Do you, maybe Doug and Ryan,
Right,
if you
right,
want to
right.
talk in broad,
Yeah, I can just show you, to quickly run through what we did, and then
perfect.
we took a shot at a format for it that might be useful, but let me.
Yeah,
find-
one-
Ultimately, what's going to happen is I'm piecing it together just so we can read through it, but I do think it will take some sort of copy editing and maybe another party to look at it, to shape it.
Yeah, when we were doing it, Nancy, it seemed that the kind of information fell into 3 areas. And when Doug pulls it up, we'll look at those. And it occurred to us that if everyone, as they put their sections together, kind of followed that same format, I think the document would fall into place more easily. So can you allow Doug to share?
I did.
She did, and I'm trying to find it.
So as you're talking, and again, Steve and Matt, I just literally pretty much plugged it in as you gave it to me. So I don't know if we'll look at it, but I think if we all agree on a format or whatever, or if you want to add to it.
Yeah, I'm having a glitch here where I can't seem to find it.
Why don't you guys talk through it, and then I'll share this as a Google Doc that either we can edit or I can share, because
We forward it to you. Can you open it? Can you share it, Nancy?
well, you can share it, Ryan, if you have it.
Okay.
I gave everybody permission to screen share.
Okay, all right, let me see if I can.
So Amy and I also finished our section, but I'm wondering if it would be easier if we all sent everything to one team of people
Yeah.
That was
who
me.
then did the editing that way, rather than
Yeah.
us taking your formats and putting them into what we did. If we could send it to one set of people and then have that set of, because we all trust that set
Yep.
of people, whoever that is.
It's been me. I mean,
Okay.
that's why, yeah, so if you send it to me, and again, I do
Okay.
think, I'm not an
That's what we'll do.
editor, but I can put it together so it's at least legible, which is why I wanted to share the way Matt and Steve.
Okay, we'll send it to you.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm not sure why I couldn't share mine, but
Hopefully I'll be able to navigate here. So do you see it?
yeah.
Okay.
So I know we got a lot to get through. We made 4 basic recommendations, summarized them at the top here. They really pretty much reflect what Nancy put in the draft she just showed. The town should pass a formal proclamation and a subsequent resolution committing to addressing racial equity. All this wording is up for discussion. We sort of equivocated a bit about it, but the town of Fairfield should review descriptions of town history and ensure that they are accurate, transparent, and inclusive of the history of all races. Should create a permanent commission on racial equity. We have to figure out what the difference between a commission, task force, or some other group would be. We actually, for discussion, recommended that the town should hire a full-time, for discussion, town diversity officer charged with oversight and
good.
management of
Perfect.
racial equity planning and response. And I think just hearing tonight, the range of things that are going on that need to go on, the way we need to find a channel for those stories to get into the consciousness of the town. This is beyond the scope of what this task force can do for sure. And probably even a permanent commission could do. There needs to be a point person in town. So we then go on in the rest of the document to detail under each recommendation the current situation. We've pasted in here what we believe to be the only statements on the website right now or publicly made about racial equity. If you want to cringe, read the section. Well, here's sort of the mission. We didn't find any other additional statements. So we're really recommending that the town leadership needs to make a strong statement about racial equity. And I think we'll have to discuss as a group how forceful that should be, or we think it should be. So there's a rationale for our recommendations and then some resources. And that's the format we've used for all the recommendations. So description, brief description of the current situation, a rationale for that assessment, and then some resources. The second recommendation was around sort of a narrative, really a clear description of the history of racial issues in Fairfield. The current statement on the website essentially suggests that racial issues stopped being significant in 1848 with the abolition of slavery in Connecticut. There's no public statement beyond that about sort of racial issues in town. And what we copy that in here. Moving on to recommendation 3, which is basically to commit or establish this task force as a permanent commission. And we've suggested some of the responsibilities and sort of areas of focus for that. Use some of the deep dive listening information to really inform that recommendation. Notably the comments that there's really no point person in town, that there's a lot of confusion, a lot of variability in what different departments are doing. So we're recommending a clear, empowered commission. And recommendation 4 would be that full-time diversity officer who he or she would, or they would collaborate with the permanent commission to oversee and manage all racial equity initiatives.
This is really well thought. I mean, it looks very thorough. Steve and Matt, it looks like there's some cross recommendations.
Yep.
How do we want to?
I don't think we want to do anything. Just let's gather all.
Yeah, let's put that all into one file
Yeah.
and start sifting through it. But it's good that the recommendations are going to overlap.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So just in terms of for formatting purposes, this is maybe a little in the weeds. So since you're really in the first section, Ryan and Doug, would you then recommend, so that you include all of this, it's really thorough. Then Steve, if you have some similar recommendations for the second bucket, just keep them. And so again, if they keep hearing them and it's sort of repeating them, or is it synthesizing?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Why
I
did
think you synthesize it.
why did those, why were there crossover? You had the second section that you covered, Steve?
Yeah, I guess it was a second section.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to get back and close my chat. I mean, close the share.
There should be a little black bar on your computer and look for a button that says stop share.
Yeah.
If not, it might have went to a little square. You should be able to hit the Zoom icon and there you got it. You got it.
Okay, there we go. Okay, is it off?
Yeah, it's off.
Okay, great, thank you. What do people think about that format of using current situation and rationale and resources as a way to lay out your information? By putting the rephrased recommendation, then having a section where you put, what the current situation is, what the rationale for making that recommendation, and then resources. Does that make sense to people as a format to use?
It's very clear. It's very concise. There's a flow to that. In some ways, Steve, even though you guys don't use those words, you have the similar framework.
That's what we found initially. The information kind of very naturally fell into those 3 buckets as we were collecting it and looking at it. It just was like, okay, how can this be organized so that it makes a little, makes more sense for the reader and also makes a compelling case.
Nancy, what I would recommend is, the ones who have worked on it, send it to you, and you start sending it to whoever the copy editor is, and laying it out that this is the first is the way we want to formulate it, and these are the ones which we have now, and now tell us what is missing. So where do we need to add stuff to?
Could each person actually take those categories and organize their information in that way before it goes to Nancy?
it's pretty much done that. I mean, I don't know. I think it's pretty much, with us, it's pretty much done that way. Kathy, yes?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
pretty much,
I mean, the language
yeah.
will be different because
Right.
we are different things. So the language will have to,
like,
it'll have to be one, you know, the tone and the language will
Yeah.
need to be
Yeah.
definitely changed
right,
to match everyone else's.
Yeah,
yeah.
I
And we
think,
don't, yeah,
oh, go
and we
ahead.
don't necessarily have a rationale section for everything because there is no community collaboration, formal community collaboration at all. So we just said, well, there isn't any, and this is what we recommend.
Now we were finding that there was some, there is
Oh, we-
some other information to substantiate it if you, like, even in the CCM. And
Yeah, well,
So that's where you're
yes.
coming from, is like the CCM toolkit, that Kellogg
Yes.
Foundation stuff, the deep
Mhm.
dive listening.
We used the CCM toolkit and we used the Organization of Cities, I can't
Yeah,
remember the
I think if
acronym.
we-
but-
And I think someone looking at this with a 30,000 mile view or 10,000 will be able to say like, okay, you're missing that here.
Yeah,
Someone who is just
exactly.
looking at it completely. And so then we can go back and that could be part of the process.
Yeah, and
of-
wordsmith it then.
And
yes.
wordsmith it then. So
Yes.
what I would recommend is that, given this, if you haven't really started to flesh out in a real meaningful way yet, that you try to follow as best you can sort of what we've just discussed. And Ryan and Doug just talked through a really good framework.
Mhm.
If you have, like Innie and Kathy, I just got your document. I'm just going to plug it in
Mhm.
and play around a little just to see just formatting wise.
Yes.
And then, you know, as I get the others, we can go from there. And when we think it's at a spot where it's ready to.
How can we share these amongst ourselves? I'd like to see the other ones, you know, on paper. I can't just go based on what I just saw on a screen for 5 minutes. I'm not that quick.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
How do we,
Yeah, so
how can we
what
share
about
without being subject to
FOIA?
the FOIA stuff?
Well, what they've said is that you can share works in progress,
Which is what this is, a draft.
which is
okay.
really what it is. So
Okay.
I'm very comfortable if we share. I don't want to do it in a Google Doc because I think it's too many editor eyes, and but I think what I can do is put together what Ryan has sent, put it into the document, which will have what Steve has put. I'll put yours in. It's going to be a lot of pages, but I can send that around
Great.
to this group. And since it's a smaller group, it's, and then as needed if people want to see. And then we can present a draft officially.
That'd be helpful.
Nancy, I'll raise my hand for some copy editing once you coalesce things, since I
Yeah.
did get in on the action
Yeah.
right now, or I'm not in on that action, which I'm cool with. So I'll
Perfect.
put on my editor hat, which I do as a writer anyway. So
Especially
I'll
because
do-
and
then
it's also
Ryan,
coming.
maybe I'll call you and say, hey, Ryan, you look too.
Yeah, because it's, I assume that the timeline will be part of this blueprint in some fashion, whether it's a table attached at the back or whether it's supporting documents or whatever. So the language, if Karen is the one who wrote, because I think Karen, you're the one who wrote a lot of what's in the timeline that we followed. So if you're the one editing, that would be helpful because it's the one person.
Maybe, is that accurate, Nancy? Last week, did you share something I had already started?
No, the timeline that we've
Initial
all
and-
been
Oh,
following.
the initial.
The
Yeah.
initial, right? Okay.
Yeah. Because I think, again, collecting that material will be part of the package. You know, like we have a land use document that I'll want to put in there. It's interesting backup. You know, we have some of these best practices that we've just collected that we could use as kind of the research, the addendum section. So we can put all of that in there, and the timeline and the findings. So I will, the next steps then I would say for the next meeting, if someone could look, it's as we're talking, if you don't mind, because this one came up really quick. Is anyone able to look?
Yeah, I'm just checking.
April 22nd?
Okay, good. So we have some time. So for April 22nd, let's commit to make sure, you know, in the next, do you think it's a week is enough time so that so that Karen and I can have the basis of some real document for the 22nd? Or do we need another kind of check-in meeting like this? I would hope that with
So
another week,
what exactly are you gonna do now? What's this?
we're gonna just collate it together and kind of have the real basis for something that has meat and substance that we're gonna start to really, put
Yeah, but
together as,
The first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna put everything in one document, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna look at it and decide if we're all gonna use the same format or wording as Doug did. And then-
well, it's not that we're all gonna, because as I said, Steve, there's a lot that's, yours is not that dissimilar really. Like maybe you don't have the word rationale, but it's sort of framed in a very similar way.
Do you want me to put it in those words? That's the question. I mean, or do you want everybody to put theirs in those words, or do you want, or not? I mean, that's kind of.
Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to go back and do that, and agree to that, then yes, that's very helpful.
Let me ask, hey, Matt, quick question. Do you follow what they're saying? And you think that's simple enough to do, or is that not clear?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple enough to do. I guess the question is you kind of have to work backwards, right? Like you have to decide now what the finished product is going to look like so that you can decide what information needs to go into that, right? So if you want it to be, each one of those items in the CCM toolkit is attached to one or more recommendations, and then each recommendation needs its own specific rationale, and then you have supporting documents or resources or links, right? How that's presented matters, right? Do you want the resources pasted in? Do you want the resources with just links? Do you want the rationales? Because the rationales are going to overlap across multiple recommendations. So do you want that to be sort of a end notes situation where you can just refer to all the resources and all the rationales at the end rather than repeating them over and over? So I think that's why it might help to just get everything all together, look at it, know what the recommendations are, and then start building.
I think you make a great point.
Executive summary in a way with the recommendations, and then the fuller report might have this other stuff in it.
Yeah.
That's how we were envisioning it, that there was like an executive summary of where all the recommendations were up at the top. You saw those immediately. And then for each one of them, you had what's the current situation. This is the backup for each. This is the thought. This is the deep listening. This is the research that's been done. This is the why this is an important thing. And then the resources for that particular item. And some will have more resources than other or need more resources. And we also talked a little bit about, the acknowledgement piece. Yes, that would be done like within a resolution, but maybe that's a very important thing to put up front as an introduction to the actual document, along with the statistical data and, some things that apply to everything, kind of like case situation.
Which is why I think, to Matt's point, if we can put everything in the way people have it, and then what we can do is sort of pull out and look at it broadly and say, oh, okay, we say this 10 times, we don't need to say it here. I would say that seems to make the most sense to my brain, but
let's get it and look at it.
Yeah, let's just put it, let's almost like do the brain dump of the work that you guys are doing and then look at it, if that makes sense. And Karen, and me, and another team. Sorry, it's loud.
I think Jason's trying to say something.
This is Jason. I have a quick question. Does anybody know what the blueprint recommendation should look like going up to the first selectman or whoever receives it? Like, do we understand what the output should be, what the artifact should look like? And then I have a second question, which do we have availability to resources that may be able to help us get it into the appropriate format?
I mean, that's what we're talking
I just wanted
about.
to put that out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly the heart of this discussion is like, what is it's I think it's going to be a many page. And again, I think a lot of the rationale will be similar. So maybe right now, between Steve and Matt and Doug and Ryan, your work, maybe there is, you know, a lot of stuff where you're saying the same thing for the rationale. So we decide to merge it, or maybe it's important to restate it every time we can. I mean, I think we all envision many pages of, you know, headlines, and then organize the way that the CCM in those categories. And I'll share my screen if I could, because I think what I
guess I'm just playing devil's advocate.
then, but yes, is there,
you mentioned something about, we think that it needs many lines of stuff, right? That we need to break this all out. Maybe we don't need to have it so long, is what I'm saying. Maybe we don't need to. I'm just wondering if there's any, if we know exactly what we need to submit and how it should be submitted.
So
You know, maybe it doesn't need to be 100 lines or everything broken out. And that's what I'm saying. If we're going, maybe we're doing too much work, and maybe we could just ask somebody.
Yeah. So I had a conversation with Brenda about, I don't know when to go, 2 weeks ago, perhaps. And one of the things that she discussed was how much she liked the strategic plan and how excited she was with the work of the strategic plan committee. And so on the web page for that, I just shared the link. It talks about an executive summary, a presentation, the detailed strategic plan. My assumption after my conversation with her is because she even said, you may want to invite them to talk to you guys about what they did and how they put it together. And my point is just, this would be something she would expect because that's what she got from them. And so we should not do exactly that, but use it as some insight into the document she's expecting.
yeah, and I think, Jason, to your question about having resources, hopefully someone who does this sort of thing makes like PowerPoints, and I've seen the strategic plan, not to mention it has nothing to do with equity and inclusion in it. But you know, she's looking for a polished presentation that's done in PowerPoint that has pretty colors, and you know, that's like the easy part in a way. So I just want to go through this as just so you can see kind of how I did. I added where you said overview, and I added the word rationale. I had done that even before we had this conversation. So this is the work Matt and Steve had done. So they talk about having the need for a plan and for long-term implementation, and they have some of their backup documentation here. So you can see, and so again, Sandra had started this way and she was just answering the questions. What I had done just to prepare for this meeting was turn the checklist into statements rather than questions. And I think what will be helpful is using that checklist as statements, as the kind of executive summary. And we can go through, and that would be like our top line recommendations. And then it's fleshed out in all of these things. So again, these are the, where it says community collaboration and budget. Those are the headlines from the CCM checklist. The notes I made were things that aren't included. Is the charter interesting, strategic plan. Those aren't covered in headlines, and I want to make sure that those things are in culture, arts, and I would say history. Those don't, I want to make sure that those have an appearance somewhere in our blueprint. The space where Lenasia, her group and their presentation, and maybe again, that's just in the backup. The charter revision, I think just again, having a space, and then as we were talking about for the blueprint, including the research, the resources list, best practice, and our deep listening findings. So I just wanted you to see kind of where I was thinking when I was starting to collect, and I can plug in, I'll plug in what Doug and Ryan sent without editing. I'll plug in what Kathy and Innie have sent without editing, and then I can share that with the group. And then maybe what we do is I share that, and then we spend next time talking more about, as I get more of the documentation from all of you, we can talk more about what it looks like. Is that kind of a good next step? You guys can read it for homework. We can share the draft.
What date would you like to have everyone have it in for you?
Well, I think with enough time, the meeting is, sorry, say it again. It was the
22nd.
So I would say maybe a week before that. I mean, the sooner the better.
So wait, what are we getting you? Are we taking our what we've
You-
submitted now and then redoing it?
No,
Or-
I would say you've done it. And what I'll
Okay.
try to do is get everybody the, I'll call it together,
So it's the first run.
first run.
Okay.
And then we
Okay.
have it prepared so that everybody by, I'm just looking at my calendar. So today's by the 15th, which gives everyone a week and 2 days. And so that we have, or if you could give it to me by the 14th, and then I'll send it out on the 15th. And so we have a full week to really read it and talk through format. And I mean, what do you all think?
Say that again?
So if everybody can submit, if you, well, you have submitted. So Steve, I assume you and Matt want to just keep as is, or if you have additional information, everyone can submit to me by the 14th, which is a week from tomorrow. And then I will distribute a week in advance so that everyone has the opportunity to read. And then we can, because that really will be the beginning of the framework for what we edit. So it'd be the unedited guide almost of the first draft of a blueprint.
I'd like to agree on a format before the next meeting.
Yeah.
And people
I-
put it in that format.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're cutting a lot of work for yourself, because it took a significant amount of work to take that information and actually get it into a format.
Yeah.
So if each group could get their section into that format, you'd be ahead of the game, even if you move things around later.
All right, well then, great, Steve and Matt, if you're willing, and Kathy and Innie, if then I'll, take it back, and I won't do this. I'll go back to,
No, you should still do that.
Still receive it, but just when people send it to you, it's already got a similar.
right,
format.
but Kathy and Innie have not sent it in that format, and neither has Steve and Matt. So that's what I'm saying.
No, but that doesn't matter. They'll do that. We want the whole document the way everybody submitted it.
You're saying two
then-
different things, sorry.
Yeah, you and Ryan are saying two different things, Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I was saying the same thing as you, Steve.
Yeah, and then so everybody just and then you take it and put your section in that format. And then
So-
by
I
the
think
time we
they're
have the
saying
next
the
meeting,
same thing. He's saying take his section, and he and Matt would take their section, put it in that format. Innie and Kathy would take their section, put it in the same format.
but give us the document the way everybody submitted it first. And then,
Sorry, Steve, it's so confused. I don't know why I'm so confused, because you're saying not everybody has submitted. The only people that have submitted are Ryan and Doug, who just submitted now, you and Matt, and Innie and Kathy.
so
So
whoever, if they
I
haven't
have
submitted
the,
it,
oh,
if they haven't submitted it, do it in that format. If you have submitted it,
So that's clear cut. Like if you've not submitted it in this format. The
right, if
question
you have submitted it, just go ahead and put it all in the document, let us look at it.
Right.
And then you change your section.
but my point is, since all it is you guys have just emailed it to me, why don't you change it first? Because you're adding work that feels, Kathy and Innie, if you could just spend some time redoing it before I populate the document.
Yeah, I
Steve
can-
and Matt, before I populate the document, why don't you take it back and work on it in that format?
I would recommend, because it would be easier to look at it holistically if the large structural formatting is.
So what, Ryan and Doug, if you could spell out and send an email to the larger group, or send it to me and I will send it to the larger group, a skeleton.
Yeah, spell
how it
out your
should-
format. Yeah.
spell out the format.
Yes.
And so,
That'll work.
and then what I'll do is I will, Steve and Matt, take out what I've put in of yours and I will populate it once you guys resubmit it. So I'm going to take all of this and I'm just going to send you the way I've asked the questions of the document of the CCM checklist. If that makes sense. And then we will, and then I won't edit it. I'll take what you guys submit it and I'll populate it and then we can do it. So
I just step out for a second, so I may have missed this, but can we send the draft that Ryan and I did for our section out to everyone directly without triggering a FOIA issue, or?
you can, because it's a draft,
Okay, so I can send the whole.
but send it with a skeleton if you don't mind.
I'll do both. I'll send the skeleton and the full.
Great.
Our
Yes.
full
Just label it
draft.
really clearly that this is a, work in progress draft.
Yeah, I'll retitle it so it's clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the same with this. Again, Karen and I were on that call when we very specifically asked the question about working documents, and they said it's fine because that's the more efficient way. So at the next round, we'll be able to share something, and it will be. And again, this is all recorded, so anyone that wants to look at it can look at it. So.
Can I just ask for clarification, Nancy? Just the part that you said, arts, education, and culture. You said it was a note to yourself to make sure we cover that?
But to cover in the fact that I want to make sure after, when we're reading through this,
Yeah.
that there's language that in our recommendations.
Yeah. So would that cover things like, if we all agree that we think that it would be great if the town provided, or the museum or some town body provided anti-racism work that people could take, or book lists or whatever, like, will that cover that kind of stuff? Because that doesn't seem to be covered on the municipal checklist. It doesn't really fall into any area.
Which is why I felt it was important to put it there,
Okay, great.
especially like
Great.
having those conversations that we
Yes.
just had.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that
Okay.
we don't need, I don't know what the difference in the quantifiable or qualitative, or, the stories that we're hearing is rationale.
Yes.
It is metrics. So that's why I would want to include that. Okay. So are we good? Matt, Steve, that makes sense. Any, Kathy, makes sense in terms of taking the work you do. Great. So Doug and Ryan, if you could share your skeleton and your fleshed out document, and I will put it in here, and I will also.
Can I ask a potentially complicated question, but we don't have to answer it now, but one of the issues we're going to have to decide is, are we going to, as a force, draft our recommended proclamations and statements, or are we going to leave that for the Board of Selectmen to do?
Well, I do think that there's best practices, and there's the group that is looking at that may have their recommendations. And when we look at the blueprint, we may say we need to offer a recommendation. I think that's one thing we should look at.
Yeah, I think, yeah. It's sort of like when you're in a courtroom, you tell the judge the way you want the judge to rule. We want to tell them what specifically, what you want it to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, agreed.
Which looking at the various options or examples, we'll have some tough discussions within this task force to really settle on the words that, and how strong or sort of forceful we want to be about this.
But remember, Doug, as much as we want to do it, and we will put it, at the end of the day, it's the town attorney.
Right.
Whether they're going to do it, yeah.
Well aware. Yeah.
So therefore, I think let's be a little gentler with each other, we're recognizing fully well that.
Very wise, yes.
Yeah.
All right. My brain is exploding in a good way, I guess. Any other comments, questions? New items? I'm gonna rush it along then and say, is anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Steve, and seconded by Innie. All in favor? Any objections? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.